All right, got a question here from Tamara, which is, members in our Discord community tend to engage in the server when they are new to the community, or if they've got a specific technical question, but there's very little engagement from standard members outside of that. Any thoughts? Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to share here, because this can often be a common pattern, especially with communities that are primarily anchored around support, around Q&A. And I want to kind of break this into a few different pieces, and I want to give you kind of 3 things to really start focusing on as practical next steps. But let's look at the reason why this happens. Usually the reason why this happens is because people who are going into your Discord server are kind of viewing it in a very utilitarian manner, right? It's that I've got a question about, you know, this particular thing, this product or service or whatever it might be. I'm going to post it into Discord, and then somebody's going to give me a response. And then once I'm done with that, I'm out. I'm out. Right? So it's kind of similar in some ways to filing a support ticket.
52.
Or you know, any other just kind of push-pull mechanism for getting a response. And while that is one function of a community, I think it's not the kind of community you want to build. Like, we want to create a community where it's not just about the utility of asking a question and getting a response, that it's a place where we all thrive together, right? Where not only can people answer my questions, but also where I can learn new skills, where I can be better at what I do, whatever the topic of the community is focused on, where I can see what other people are doing and learn and grow from them, where I can be vulnerable, where I can share when things that I'm doing aren't working out, and I can get guidance from other people for how to improve them, where I can be inspired by my fellow community members as well.
Inspiration. Very well.
Okay, so the philosophical thing that we need to do here in what you're asking about here, Tamara, is we need to transition your community from being a utilitarian function into a place, into an environment where people thrive, okay?
We will thrive.
Now, there's kind of like a set of practical things you can do, and then there's, again, a philosophical approach to this. The philosophical approach to this is to really identify who your target audience is, to zone in on those pain points, and to really just start delivering quick wins. So one thing that I'd recommend you do in the creating your audience persona's focal point is to go through that exercise of generating all of those pain points, and then for each of them, flip them on the, you know, think of it as like a coin. You flip it onto the other side. The pain point is on one side, and the solution to that pain point is on the other side. And just try and uncover what those quick wins would be, right? So, for example, if I had a community that was focused on photography, and I identify that one of the pain points that people are having is that, you know, people are operating on a budget, and that they want to buy a really great lens, but they don't know which lens to buy, and they don't want to waste their money on a lens that isn't a good fit for them, and they spend a bunch of money on something they don't need. One quick win for that could be, we're going to put together a collection of the top 10 lenses that our community is using, a set of reviews or recommendations. If we have a different type of community, maybe it's an engineering community that's focused on people who are building websites. A pain point there could be dealing with cross-browser compatibility. So a quick win there could be, here's a tutorial for how to solve the main 3 issues that people struggle with in that particular topic, right? When you start providing those quick wins in your community, community members make a mental shift. They think of it less as, I go there, I ask a question, I get a response, and then they think of it more as, oh, I actually went to the community and there were some really interesting conversations and discussions, and I learned some new skills. And that's where we start making that transition.
This seems good.
Right?
Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to build up and focus towards that. But that's kind of how I would recommend you approach it. Now, if you want to build an amazing community around your product or service, you should totally check out my Community Leadership Core Accelerator. This is where we provide hands-on coaching, training, and accountability that's all tailored exactly to your company's needs, and it helps you to deliver clear, consistent results every quarter with way less stress and frustration. If you're interested in finding out more, click on the link down there in the video description, where you can book a call with us and we can listen to what you want to achieve, what problems you're having, and we can provide you some really concrete next steps on that call, okay? Now, obviously, there are many different elements in how you approach that, but there's 3 things I'm going to recommend you do right now.
Like right now?
Like right now.
So the first one is I'd recommend is that you go and take a look and evaluate all of the data that you have on your community members, right? So go and look at, when you look at Discord, go and look at the conversations that are netting the most replies, the most emoji likes, you know, the greatest diversity of people who are joining. Like if you've got a conversation that's got, you know, 10 replies and it's 3 people, that's interesting. But if you've got a conversation that's got 10 replies and it's got 8 people, that's also interesting.
That's how they talk in the Major League.
So try and identify, you know, what are the topics, what are the themes that are generating more engagement, because that's going to give you kind of a set of, you know, a set of priorities that you want to kind of go through, right? So you want to create like a priority list based upon where people engage more. And then what that can do is that can give you a sense of what you put out there, okay? Now what I'd recommend you do is you focus on convos, so conversation starters, and content, right? I've mentioned this a few times previously in CLC, but as a general rule, I'd recommend you have 1 piece of content a week and you have 2 conversation starters a week, right? So let me just, that's a week, okay? We wanna create an environment where, you know, when people show up to your community, if somebody shows up in a utilitarian community where it's just Q&A, when they first log into Discord, all they see is a bunch of questions and answers. And it's not very exciting, it's not very fun, it's not very engaging. Whereas if when they enter into your community, there's interesting finds and cool content and people sharing videos and people just being really loose and fun and engaging with each other.
I told you this would be fun.
It creates a very different vibe. So that's what we want. If you have at least 1 piece of content a week, it could be a blog post or a video. It doesn't have to be something that you produce, just something that's relevant to those pain points, especially, you know, the patterns that you're seeing in the data. You have kick off 2 conversations a week. You're just throwing more out there to capture people. You know, think of your community as almost like, you know, it's kind of like a lake, right? And right now, you've got kind of like lots of just like individual little hooks that are going in there that are related to Q&A. But if you add loads more hooks in here that relate to interesting finds and content and interesting discussions, then the fish that are floating around in your lake, they've got more things to kind of hook onto and then to start keep coming back, okay? So that's definitely where, the kind of how I tend to think of it. And then the other thing I'd recommend you do is you focus on what I call external pulls, right? And external pulls are going to be things that you do outside of Discourse to pull people back in. Now, like one really powerful way of doing this is going to be email. Now, you may not have the email address of your members because Discord, you can sign up without an email address, but that's one thing that you could do. You can also do social media. You can also do events and webinars and things like that. You know, there's lots of different ways in which you can pull people back in. So, you know, if you've got a bunch of people who are not, if you've got their email addresses and they're not engaging as much in your Discord channel, and you put some of this content out or these conversations out there, send an email and say, hey, we just published this thing in Discord, you might want to go and check it out. That's the kind of thing. The most important thing as you go through this is just every week, as I keep saying, progress over perfection is the most important approach here.
We are making progress.
Just get a couple of conversation starters out there each week. Start seeing what's resonating, what's not resonating, and then what you're going to do is just you're going to gradually dial it in. It's a very scientific approach, right? Because when you, for example, you know, if you're identifying, oh, you know, these top 3 ones here, you know, these 3 topics in your community are consistently getting a response. Every time we post something on those topics, people are interested. Then you start generating some really interesting insight. I'll give you a tiny example of this in the CLC world, which is if I go and take a look at the vault, right? Just look at these tags, right? These are where I tag content. You know, every time I upload a video, I tag content. And here you can see, based upon the number of items in each of these tags, generally where a lot of the conversation and discussion tends to anchor. Look how much more Look how many more videos are in engagement versus the next one, which is conversation starters at 8 items, right? This tells me very clearly that engagement is the #1 thing that people care about in CLC. And conversation starters is relevant to that, but also meetups. This tells me that getting people together for online and in-person events, meetups and events here, both got 7, right? Very, very interesting to people. So again, like this is data that I can then use to help guide what I post in CLC. You want to generate similar kinds of data. Even if it's just kind of relatively thin like this, it can be really helpful in guiding what you do next. All right. As is always the case, if you've got any questions, feel free to ping me or you can ask in the CLC community on Slack. And best of luck.